So I hit it, I exhaled, hit it, looked into the mirror, and it was like this: man, woman, child, brown, black, yellow, red, blue, old, young, like just fractaling through different faces. And then languages and songs that I knew them, but I didn't know them, playing at like warp speed, spiraling as a funnel, like out of my ears. And as those left and the faces dissolved, then it went into that, and I was like, whoa. And then as I looked again, it was just like fractaled sacred geometry, like looking at an Alex Gray painting, right?
Wow.
And I was like,
Tyson, thank you for doing this, brother.
yeah.
I appreciate you allocating the time. I think you're doing a very important work. And just for the audience, for them to understand the context, I'll say it very, very, like a very short summation, then you'll give us the context and the deeper part of it, just who you are and what you do. From what I understand, the work that you're doing has to do with helping men get over their pornography addiction. Mm-hmm. And you're incorporating a lot of different modalities and elements to do so. You're also an actual therapist, but you brought both your professional understanding combined with your trajectory through what I guess some people would brand as the spiritual space, and your personal journey to combine it with a deeper understanding of what in fact is going on, how we are operating in terms of not just the physicality, but also energetically, what that means. Would that be a good first step to summarize what you do?
Yeah. I mean, yes, it's porn addiction, but I would say beyond that, it's grief work with men.
Interesting.
Helping men to feel, ultimately. And in that felt sense, being witnessed in whatever their pain or their suffering has been, so that they can make meaning out of that. And I help them to understand that there is meaning in that pain that they've gone through.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying that at the core of porn addiction, probably any other addiction, but for men, porn is a big, very important component, because for men, sex is an important component. Yeah. So it sounds like what you're saying, that at the core of all of these is loneliness, is disconnect from meaning.
Yeah, disconnect from meaning. But the first question I always ask men when I have a one-on-one conversation is I say, all right, when you were coming of age, moving from boyhood to manhood, did you have any sound elder male guidance, especially in the area of sex, sexuality, porn, masturbation, how to treat women? For 99% of the men that come to me, the answer is no. And I follow that back up with another question, and I say, so how old were you when you started watching porn? And usually anywhere from 10 to 13, 14 is around usually when they start. And then I say, did you see pornography before you had a real physical sexual experience in your life with somebody? And 99% of the time they say yes. And sometimes it's 1 month before they had it. Sometimes it's many years. Sometimes it's even a decade. So they've been consuming all of this programming before they ever reach a real intimate experience. And so they're bringing all of that projection of what sex and or intimacy is into the bedroom. And they now are often all grown up, right? Especially if the men are coming to me in 30, 40, 50, 60, I even work with men in their 70s, and they're still relating back to the way that they did when they were a teenager.
So it sounds like lack of guidance as well. So basically we grow into our most formative years, and we're entering them without any proper actual adult guidance. I mean, there's people around, but they're not like there with you, helping you understand, right? That would be
well, it's like understanding that in a perfect world, we would have had rites of passage, right? The men would have brought the boys out into the desert, the jungle, the forest, and there would have been an initiatory process. And if you look at indigenous cultures and African cultures, these initiatory processes, some of the boys didn't come back from them. They died in that process, right? So we've lost that, and we've been given the Playboys, the penthouses, and the Pornhub as a substitute for a rite of passage. And that's the culture that we live in.
Yeah, and it's not even, and it's interesting that you mentioned rite of passage. I was thinking about this recently, that there's this component of learning through action versus through theory. And that is something that, at least in the domain of all the really relevant things to our lives, we don't have that anymore. I think men and women. So we basically, the difference between having sex ed and, somebody showing you like a diagram of something working a certain way versus, your dad kind of, I don't know what it would look like, but maybe your dad kind of goes out with you and kind of watches you approaching women, kind of like maybe giving you pointers. That can be one, like
Sure.
who knows, right? Something like that. But it's the fact that you feel that there's some mentoring going on by a leading male figure that has been there before, just like you would expect to happen in any other domain where you learn through action. So
Absolutely. Yeah. And, mirror neurons, we're watching this on porn, and then we go and you look at all the newspapers now, and you're seeing lots of violence happening in youth. It's like, well, why wasn't that violence happening? When we were kids, it didn't happen. So you look at the eroticizing of violence, and then how that carries over into the way in which teenage boys and men act and behave.
Yeah. Say more about the connection between violence and that. Are you saying because the sexuality is misexpressed, then that energy of maybe frustration that comes out in certain ways? Or are you saying that somehow they're one and the same, that it kind of splits?
I'm saying that when you look at the studies, there was a study done back, I think in 2012 or so, and they looked at the top 100 viewed porn videos of that year, and then they looked at those videos critically through a critical lens, not an erotic lens, and what they saw was 89%, so 9 out of 10 of those videos were there was some form of violence
During the sexual act?
during the sexual act.
So it's like very forceful.
It's forceful, there's non-consent, there's slapping, hitting, choking, there's things that like ultimately are demeaning, and it's focused on the male's pleasure more than the female's pleasure, and it's shot for the man, by men, for men, right? So what I'm calling awareness to is that when we watch that violence, and that also means other things outside of just human, like meaning, for example, when I was a child, I saw bestiality porn, right? This is like men and animals. Well, at a developmental level, I'm 12. Like, I don't have a place in me to make sense of what's happening here. It's too much, too fast, too soon, which leads to trauma in the nervous system. So I'm feeling unsafe, feeling anxious, and I'm absorbing this with no boundary or no filter of what I'm taking in. And so why that's important is to understand that a lot of men have a difficult time saying no, or they're people pleasers. Well, if you're watching a bunch of porn that doesn't feel good to you and you can't stop it, and then it gets you addicted to that dopamine hit, then you end up bringing in a lot of things that make you feel icky, make you feel gross. And then we feel not safe in our own body, and then we go out and we create unsafe unsafe sexual experiences.
That's interesting. So you're pointing to a very particular moment in the psyche of a man or a young man who's watching porn, and maybe the stuff that they're seeing. I'm guessing using bestiality is just a very extreme example.
Sure.
But really, there's a fill in the blank, like whatever
Absolutely.
it is that made them feel that uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And then you're saying that they wouldn't necessarily switch or turn it off because they don't know any better. They're just like, oh, it's porn, I'm supposed to be watching it.
Yeah.
And then they just like, oh, this is normal. So they normalize it inside of themselves, and then they think it's normal.
Yep.
Okay. And then in addition to that, you're pointing to the fact that they feel this uncomfortable feeling they have that they then normalize. If they see that uncomfortable expression in somebody else's face, they go, oh, that is normal.
Yep.
Like I'm used to that.
Yep.
Yeah. Is that what you're saying?
Precisely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. So what would you say to, I realize that I do want to understand a little bit more about your personal trajectory and how you got to that. But before you dive into that, just a quick question about the violence.
Yep.
There's something to be said, and this is me just kind of, trying to put it into some kind of a frame from what I also understand. There is something to be said. Many women would say, well, I don't know many, but there's definitely some women that would say, well, I do like that.
Sure.
So then the question becomes, I guess you're saying, again, correct me where I'm misunderstanding you, but like it sounds like what you would say is that there's a way to do even that. There's a certain consent thing that you can inject kind of under the surface that you're saying currently, for most people, that part doesn't exist. It is in fact forceful without any actual attentiveness to what the woman really wants. If she happens to like it, great, it worked out. But for the most part, most males that went through this machine of watching porn at a young age, they don't actually check in. Like they just do what they do, only for themselves. That along the lines? Or
I would say yes, and then I would also say I've been on the receiving end of past partners that have wanted me to do things that I didn't want to do, but the part of me that was people pleasing would do those things, and it was what I call eroticizing wounds. So they had their own sexual trauma. They were wanting me to reenact that. I didn't have a boundary to say no, and so I did it, and then I didn't actually feel safe. They didn't feel safe, and then they were end up projecting their wounding on me, and then we would have fights and quarrels and of course break up.
It's so interesting because it goes really deep into this component of what, not just human interaction, I think all interaction of living beings with one another, which is the linguistic is one part for sure, but there's a much deeper component of how we feel in the moment. And because we don't tend to think about that, it's almost completely invisible to us. So we start blaming each other when really the operative of the uncomfortable moment is just exactly what you just described, which is you didn't know how to voice no because you were afraid they're gonna be and then you feel bad about that. So like, I'll just do it. But then the second you did, you felt uncomfortable. That uncomfortable feeling, you can't control the fact that it's in you now. They subconsciously pick up on the fact you're uncomfortable. Now they're uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So they basically, and then it just keeps going. And now, and then you expand that to society and now everything.
And that is the world of kink, right?
Interesting.
And there is conscious kink that can heal, but I would say 95% of the time it's eroticized wounding dressed up as healing. And it's
interesting.
Really not.
So you're saying that it's very difficult to imagine like a healthy kink world.
I think that it takes two psychologically sound humans that also, so I come from a parts work perspective. Like I'm trained as an IFS therapist. So for me, if you don't have any archetypal understanding of parts work and Jungian psychology, and you're just operating from, whatever's happening, there's all kinds of projections that are happening where we think we're healing or we think we're having a good time, but really there's just sexual fawning happening, right? From a trauma response, it's a fawning. Our body's telling us we want it, but our mind's going, let's not do this. And we're in that push-pull experience and we don't feel safe.
Okay. So I want to get into like how we actually help people get out of that. But before then, if you can just tell me a little bit what got you into this work, why this particular branch of paying attention to what we need to do in order to heal.
Sure.
What brought you to this?
Yeah, so 9 years old, see a Playboy in a field, Vanna White, my mom watched Wheel of Fortune. That was my first flood of information. That was when I immediately was hooked. But then when I was 12, our hometown got high-speed internet. And so there was a program called Kazaa. Do you remember that one?
Sounds very familiar.
It's like LimeWire, Napster.
I think so.
Similar.
Oh, yeah. That you can download
sharing.
whatever.
Yeah, but back then, there was no thumbnails. It was just the words, and you would click it, and then it would download it, and the file would be on your computer. And then you click play, and then all of a sudden you're like, what the hell? And people would put things into the thing that were mistitled. So that's why I also mean that you're seeing violence, but you don't even intend to see it, right? Why that's important is at that age, I hadn't even hit puberty yet. So now here I am, prepubescent, and I'm seeing huge cocks on the screen, right? Like porn stars. So that's where a lot of body dysmorphia and penis dysmorphia happens. Boys see something, they get stuck thinking my penis is small because when they were little, they saw it on the screen. So that's another important piece to this. And then my parents caught me. Of course, I was just like, try to ignore it and try to just deny it. No, it wasn't me, but of course they knew it was me. So I just took it back into the magazines and was like, okay, I'll stay away from it. And then I went off to the University of Washington in Seattle, and I joined a fraternity. And I didn't know what a fraternity was. My girlfriend, her brother was a part of it, so I was like, all right, whatever. I joined, and here's 100 men living in one home with a server, and the server had porn files, and it was literally hundreds and hundreds upon hundreds of videos of genres and porn stars and there's 20 fraternities on campus, and every single one of these fraternities had their own porn servers. And there was this reigning joke, because we had a porn chairman, there's a reigning joke of like, get off the fucking internet at like 9 or 10 because like we couldn't do our homework because guys are just beating off, right? So you mix that with alcohol and big parties and porn, and you get the misogynistic culture that we grew up in, where there was a normalization of porn for during that belly of the beast. And then you get the pickup artist shit that came out of that. And then, of course, we're kind of trying to figure out where we're at now.
Yeah, interesting.
So Pornhub came a little bit later. I was probably like 24, 25 when that finally opened.
That is so fascinating. Yeah, it's amazing how in general, when we become more and more conscious of what we did wrong so far and how to amend it, one of the things that always surprises me is to find out in how many instances of when I can look back at my life where I was convinced that everybody else understands what's happening and I just feel confused. How many of those instances nobody knew what was going on? They were all just like me. I don't think I understand what's happening, and yet you still do this whole thing. And probably most people were kind of like experiencing this same of like, oh, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
And you still participate because I guess that's the norm. Mm-hmm. And it's so easy to see in retrospect, but I wonder what other things that we're doing now that would have that kind of a flavor. Mm-hmm. What would you say from your experience working, how long have you been doing this particular work at this point?
9 years.
So that's a while. So you've been doing it almost a decade. Do you feel that there's the people that come to you now, do they come with better problems, so to speak? Like so like was it 10 years ago your eyelids climbed all the way to here? Do they climb only to here now, or you feel like
COVID ramped porn use massively.
Oh, so it re-emerged basically.
And also, I don't know how much we want to go into this, but the genre of like trans porn, like that's a whole huge conversation that we could go into. But just understanding that a lot of these men that come to me, they're coming either for one or two reasons. One, they can't attract because they literally are so addicted that they have no life force and they can't actually have the confidence to go up and say hello or even go on dating apps because they're so addicted. The other men, they're in a relationship and they're addicted and they're either terrified that they're going to lose their partner or they just have lost their partner for the porn use or for cheating or for some combination, right? So men come to me for those two different reasons. But I also work with men not just on the addiction stuff. Like men come to me for premature ejaculation, erectile dysfunction, both of which are porn-induced often, performance anxiety, and then if men want to actually take it to the next level, which is to become multi-orgasmic. So really it's like, okay, if it's just the porn stuff that I help them with and I don't take them into a different way of relating altogether where they actually have access to pleasure, then I've missed the mark. So I've realized that holistically, you have to take men from the addiction process through a semen retention journey all the way through a mindful masturbation practice to get to a place where they can actually have orgasmic love and where they can have a truly devotional partnership ultimately.
So first healing and then thriving.
Exactly.
How do you take from normal to super normal, basically?
Exactly.
Interesting. Yeah, I was really... for a long time, because part of the, I guess, spiritual pursuit or betterment of the self, whatever you want to frame it as, I definitely looked into a little bit like, Tantra and Kama Sutra and all that stuff. And I found, well, I'm just telling anecdotes, so it's totally personal to me. It definitely doesn't have to map onto everybody's experience. It probably doesn't. But my experience was that every book I picked up on the subject, even with people who were being like, no, you got to check that one. And I would read it. I was like, did a 5-year-old write this? Like every time there was like this like weird, either the language that was utilized or the ideas, the way they were framed. I didn't feel this deep wisdom there that I do feel from, let's say, practicing Vipassana or listening to, I don't know, somebody, I can't think of good examples right now, but somebody who's like really good at like kind of big in the spiritual community that definitely holds water. Is this, I guess my question there is, it's more of like a personal interest. If I come to you, what is that thing that you're taking me through in terms of practice that is different than just telling me about, how I should imagine that 10,000 suns are burning the uni or something like that.
So the thing that makes me different than most people is that if we didn't have a rite of passage, which 99% of us didn't, then we're not going to get together and do masturbation practices because that's like super strange and culturally a little bit bizarre. So what I invite,
doing it in an intersection and then
yeah, right. Unless you're in certain parts of the world, but lots of cults for sure. But my whole thing is helping men and challenging men and inviting men into what I call mindful masturbation, which is their own rite of passage, which is, if we're not going to use sex to feel better or masturbation to feel better, then what is the other option? The other option is to relate to sex and masturbation as a means to better feel. So over here, feel better. I'm sad, I'm sick, I'm bored, I'm angry, I'm anything I don't want to feel. I'll just go wank one out and I feel better for a moment, but nothing in my life changes. If we're treating it as sacred, as a devotional practice, just like a vipassana or meditation or yoga, then what would it look like to bring that level of intention into your mindful masturbation practice? So what I do is, to keep it not weird, I just say, all right, if it were the last time that you were going to masturbate and you knew you were going to die tomorrow and you wanted to do it intentionally to lift off in a good way, how would you do it differently than the way that you have been doing it? And let men sit with that.
Interesting, because I would feel that I would be a little confused, because if I have the habit of doing certain things, I don't know what I don't know, right?
Sure.
It would probably be like, I don't know, like a 5% some variation better than how I do it, which is probably what you're aiming for, right? And then you up to
5% is better than just doing it with pulling up the porn, right? So it's
basically showing them that there is a better way in general.
There's a better way, and that I'm not going to necessarily teach you exactly how to do it, but here are some things to think about. Cyclically, moon cycles. Like my energy, for me, it's masturbation only on the full moon, right? So I was in 3 years of celibacy, and I would build my own mindful masturbation practice under the moon, where I was channeling and doing DMT and doing psilocybin and all kinds of things, and connecting to the planetary systems that are beyond just my own psyche or my own fantasy. And then if your cock is the only thing that you think is the erotic zone, you're missing the whole point. Your whole body is an erotic zone. So what does that look like? To self-massage, set the tone, candles, lights, music, whether you're inside, outside, right? There's a lot of different ways you could do this, including stuff that we'll talk about, mirror work, right? Okay, there's mirror work with DMT and psychedelics, but there's also mirror work with mindfully connecting to your own pleasure practice. So point being is, as I sat with that question, my thing morphed and became basically a very beautiful ritual where I self-initiated into manhood. Nobody initiated me. I began the process of not outsourcing my pleasure to a woman or porn or anything to make me feel better. And I reclaimed my own right to my own pleasure by learning how to create it and be with it and to enjoy it. And I brought myself into these multi-orgasmic altered states of consciousness, which in many ways were as impactful or more impactful than even doing, let's say, DMT or 5-ABO or ayahuasca or whatever, right?
Why full moon, by the way?
I've just noticed that my energy levels and my erections in the morning and the evening were just always significantly heightened. And then I started looking into it, and when you look at pagan rituals, they actually also had that, but I didn't know it until I'd already done it for many years. So that was very interesting for me to see that. I also did it on the new moons, and that was interesting. But for a man of my age, I'm 40, so it's about every 2 weeks is the right amount of time to release. If you're going to release, it's about every 2 weeks. So you take your age, and then I times it by 0.35, and that number is how many days you should leave in between when you're ejaculating.
Interesting.
Yeah. So guys in their 20s once a week, guys in their 50s, once a month, that kind of thing.
Again, not that it really matters because it sounds about right, but why specifically that number that you came up with, 0.35?
If you look at Taoist texts, they equate 1 drop of semen equivalent to, 30 drops of blood. So this is the elixir of life. So you don't want to do this too often. So they built in these protocols. And if you look at Montauk Chia, he's got a graph that basically says, if you're this old, this is how much you should wait. But I have found that 0.35 is the fucking number. I don't know why.
Cool. Yeah. What are your thoughts on people that say that you should learn to not masturbate at all in terms of does it according to you, does your energy go stale if you don't do that? What happens if you don't?
I went 8 months without one time, and when I actually masturbated again, there was so much depletion that I felt horrible.
Oh, you mean it built up so much, or your body stopped producing it?
It stopped producing, and the edge that I fell off of was also a cliff.
Oh, so it's like boof. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Because you go so high, and so what I think is like preferable, like full spermatogenesis. Like when I'm gonna conceive a child with my partner, we're not ready for that yet. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do a dry fast for 5 days, which clears out my entire cellular stuff and brings stem cells in, and then I'm gonna do 90 days of spermatogenesis. So, 90 days of semen retention, which equals full spermatogenesis. So spermatogenesis is just the maturity of the sperm is at its peak at 90 days.
Interesting.
So what I found is that scheduling it on the moon cycles at 90 days will be that conscious conception where we're going to choose the date, the time, the moment at full sperm, and we're going to make sure that that's an orgasmic experience whereby which that creates new life.
Amazing. Yeah. It's funny you say that because the day me and my partner conceived, we knew right away, and it was a full moon.
Wow. There you go.
we knew on the spot because it was just too weird. It was like we were out for a wedding of a friend, and we met also on the way to weddings. We were both on the plane, and then we went to also in Florida. But I don't know what is it with the weddings in Florida. And then we were in this beautiful hotel room, and there was like seashells on the walls. It was all like very angelic and white, and there was like this extra stimulation happening. I don't know, like we were attracted to each other very much so, but it was like extra, and it was like, and then it was like this very passionate thing, and then at the end it was like, I think you're pregnant, and she goes like, I think so too. I was like, this is, and it was true. I was like, that's so wild. It was, and it was a full moon. So it's just so you can say that.
There you go. Amazing.
Yeah.
I'm stoked for you.
What is now the juice? What's the wildest thing you've heard? It's like, what would you say is if you have to break it down? So like people watching, right? What would you say? You know these. I don't know if this is urban myths or whatever, right?
Sure.
So like, I do know that if you eat pineapple, it's supposed to make your semen taste better, that kind of stuff. But obviously it has to do with your nutrition, right? But is there anything more broad, more professional you can say about that, both in terms of energetic consumption and food consumption, and what actually goes on into like how does it influence the actual semen?
Yeah, I mean, that's a little bit above my pay grade, but I will say that this is actually segueing perfectly because ultimately in our seminal fluid we have, and when we release, we have vitamins, minerals, sugars, amino acids, and proteins. And it's actually quite a lot. And when we ejaculate, that energy leaves, those actual nutrients leave, and then it triggers our hypothalamus in the brain and our organs and our endocrine system to work on overdrive to reproduce our seminal fluid. So when you think about what you eat, whether it's pineapple or whether it's, like I just took some Shilajit, right? Whatever these nutrients are that we put in our body, they end up becoming our seminal fluid. And if you're putting in the right fuel, you can rebuild your seminal fluid much quicker. For men that are not attuning to their own diets and like vitamin and their nutrients, and they don't know this, well, then what happens is you're doing this too much, too fast, too soon, and then it pulls on the hypothalamus in the brain. And when you look at the hypothalamus, it's...
Sorry, just to clarify, when you say too much, too fast, too soon, you mean masturbate too much?
Masturbate or ejaculate with sex, either or. Because some men come to me and they masturbate once a day, some men 3 times a day. And I'm like, whoa, let's take a pause here. Because what happens is as I reflected on my own puberty, it actually delayed my puberty because I was ejaculating too much. And I've seen men that are really highly addicted where they actually have bone density loss and they become thin. And so what I also have noticed is when you research the hypothalamus, this is the remote control of our life. It is our hunger, our thirst, our body temperature, our focus, our drive, our testosterone, our sleep is all regulated by that one part of our system. And so if we are ejaculating too often, we're actually working out on overdrive. And then what happens when we're dysregulated, what I have found is that all men have a secondary crutch that they go to. Because if you're low of energy and you're dysregulated and your nervous system's totally fried, then you grab the Adderall, the sugar, the caffeine, the Netflix, 100%. The YouTube, the supplements. And so I always say like, hey, this is a lifestyle shift. Like doing semen retention is not a fad. It's literally a shift in consciousness. this is a completely different way to live, because now you have access to your full faculties, and your focus, drive, and flow with your business or whatever it is that you're putting your attention to is now open. And so it's an amazing hack.
I'm very agnostic about a lot of claims. I don't know anything until I really know it.
Sure.
But I did find that thinking of sperm and just the amount of I guess how much you didn't do it.
Yeah.
In terms of how much chi you have, extremely helpful.
Yeah.
It's absolutely true. Like I always felt that. Well, I mean, there's a lot of things I was ignoring, before I started becoming more conscious of myself. And this was definitely a big one. But then when I became super sensitive and noticing my own energy, this is a huge one. Yeah. When you come at the wrong time, that's game over. Yeah. That's like either a nap for an hour, or you can't even function for the rest of the day, or like I can totally see why fighters, by some trainers, are told do not have sex. Until,
musicians, trainers, fighters. Yeah. It's like, that's the biggest hack. Don't release before you're going in the ring.
I've heard that there was, you'll be able to dispel if it is a myth, or maybe it's true. There's this practice in certain circles of Kama Sutra where you bring yourself to also coming and then you don't. And they say it's supposed to bring up can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so when you work with the perineum, right, and I teach this with men, especially with massage guns and foam rollers, because men have a lot of tightness in their pelvic floor. So if you take a foam roller and you roll on top of it, or these little half balls with the spikes, and you sit on them daily, you start to get the pelvic floor to open. If you're looking at it from a Taoist perspective or Chinese medicine, that's the root chakra. Some men, if they've been spanked a lot when they were a kid, their butt is like literally puckered, and or they tuck the tail.
Whoa.
And so if you,
like a puppy that kind of goes like,
exactly.
Wow, that's crazy.
So as you get more like your ability to move the body, and then you can squeeze the perineum, you have 3 points of power down there. You have underneath your balls, and then you have one between your balls and your anus, and then you have your anus. And you can squeeze each of those points.
Oh, it's separate. It's not like one G spot. It's like a combination.
Yeah, and then that means that if you squeeze the one under your balls, you can work the energy up the front channel of the body. If you squeeze the anus, you can work the back channel. If you squeeze the middle, you can work up the center column. So you end up teaching yourself through psychedelics mainly, like I did.
Interesting.
Mushroom journeys, high dose, like 10-gram mushroom journeys, where you're just sitting there working the root, and you can literally see the chakras.
You can focus on doing that?
You can focus on the chakra.
No, you can focus on doing that.
I can do it, nice. Yes. Other men, anybody can do this, but maybe not, right? But when you...
It's just the ADHD alone. I'm like, whoa.
But when you focus on each chakra, you can, in your third eye, you can see the colors. And so when I think about the chakras that they show you, I'm like, I never understood it. I was like, what the fuck is this color thing for? I could never reach that state.
Yeah.
High dose mushrooms and squeezes, and you can start to see it, and then you're like, oh shit.
What do you think the color is about?
Well, I don't...
Well, you might not have an answer. I don't know.
It's just... I have no clue, to be honest. I think it's just a part of...
No, I'm totally on board. One of the biggest, very small tangent, one of the biggest, I guess, epiphanies that I've had. What I define as epiphany is something that I truly got from psychedelics that I know I did not get from anyone else.
Yeah.
And that was the color and qualia in general is primary. So like the redness of red is actually the fundamental thing. Our ideas about wavelength and all that stuff, these are deductions, these are abstractions, they are secondary. They're not, they're almost like helpers, side helpers to maneuver things, but they're not the primary thing. So maybe the color is actually fundamental. Maybe one of them, I have no idea. Question about the, do you recommend ball slapping, whatever that is? I saw on Instagram. It's like,
So you basically, especially if you get out of a cold plunge, it's awesome.
Because they shrivel to nothing, and then you can just...
Exactly. And if you kind of pull them and tuck them up, and then you just kind of smack them. And, sexual reflexology from a Taoist perspective is more than just ball slaps. So I teach penis stretching, right? So it's down, 10 strokes down, up, left, right, spin it around, take it around, pull it underneath, pull it, and then you massage the balls and you flick them a little bit. And
I saw a homeless guy doing that. He was an expert, right?
Oh, fuck. But these are incredible exercises. One, for the fact that our penis is a muscle. Half of it's inside of our body and the other half's out. And we're not taught this. So if you do these exercises and you do them regularly, I can literally bring myself to full erection with no hands and without looking at porn, just through drawing energy and blood into my body.
Definitely. I can tell you that when you wear very tight pants, you've never been to the military, right?
No.
So when you have very, very tight pants and you're sitting on the bus, it's a very common thing where it will create this, like, especially when you're a little tired, it creates this, your body is more sensitive. And then you notice that if you literally like start playing with that gesture, you can literally just come from not touching yourself.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. It's kind of crazy. Going back to the homeless guy. No, it's a, yeah, what did I want to ask you about this? This was so, please.
I want to say something that's really important as it relates specifically to the weaponization of porn against masculinity.
Okay.
Specifically in and around trans porn. Okay. Is that cool if we go to that place?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So there's a particular genre of porn that's out there right now called sissy hypno pornography. Sissy hypno pornography is a brainwashing cult pornography. So what they do is they take trans porn and they make little tiny clips, which is like several seconds, and then make a whole money shot of like 10 minutes of just money shot. So it keeps you in a high dopaminergic system. And then they put binaural beats on the actual video to put you in a altered sort of hypnotic brainwave state. And then they put subtitles at the bottom with a woman that basically says the script. And so you're watching this and it programs you to hate your body.
This is Clockwork Orange right there.
Yes, to take hormones and to cut off your penis and to worship cock. And this particular genre of pornography went from 125,000 on Reddit to like half or 250 or 300,000 now in a matter of just COVID. And I've worked with now 12 men that have had high addictions to this genre of porn. And why this is important is because if you watch this porn, it can take you from being in a monogamous, married, I'm a man relationship as fast as 2 months feeling that you need to break up with your wife and you actually are a woman. So that's one thing. But two, I've worked with men that have actually began the process of taking hormones, and even there are men that actually go do the surgical process. You know, so I know a man who went all the way through the surgical process, became a woman, and then he came back, did ayahuasca, realized it was that he was brainwashed, and then he's like, I'm not a woman, I'm a man. Came back, then he did Lakota training, went to the Sundance, and then did Warrior, and now he's back, but he still now lives as a man on testosterone without a penis.
Oh my God.
That's what's actually happening to our boys right now.
That's crazy.
It's fucked up.
That is so insane.
And not only that, but these men, they get into being a sissy, and then they dress like one, and then they go on Grindr, and then they go get themselves in like sexual assault situations.
Yeah.
And that's actually like, and what's trippy about this is if you are a therapist, I'm not an actual licensed therapist, but if you're a licensed therapist in most states and you go and you have like a gender related thing and the therapist doesn't gender affirm you and say, yes, you're a girl, and then they go and they report you, well then you lose your license as a therapist.
Oh yeah, now that thing as a whole, that whole world,
yes.
I'm so confused by it because I know, I know sounds like so like, I don't even know, okay. Even framing it in this way right now, to explain the context of me talking about this, it feels bizarre.
I know.
Just in the same way that it would feel bizarre to excuse to anyone how many black friends I have, which is like, they're just my friends.
Yep.
Like I had this thing with BLM one time. I had a friend, calling me, obviously a white friend, who was like, "Oh, we gotta go do the march." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" They're like, "Yeah, we got." And then he told me, you know what I realized? How racist I am because I have no black friends. I'm like, well, James, that's on you. And then I listed my black friends that he knows. I'm like, but I never thought of them as my black friends. Yeah. They're just my friends. The fact that you even think about that as a coin, as a token of any kind. So the tokenization of it is even feeling weird.
Oh yeah.
But so like all my gay friends and even trans friends, I know, and I'm talking about like close friends. So I know their psychology. I know I've never ever, well, that's not true. With the trans, it does happen, but which is, we can talk about. With gay men that are completely comfortable with being gay, I've never felt that they have some kind of a chip on their shoulder about their state in the world, about being gay. They feel fabulous. They love it. And it's really funny because at this point, with everything you're describing, they are almost Republicans for some of like just the regular gay guys that are just gay. They feel like they're like super right wing, almost like everything the left would hate. I'm only saying it in that context.
Yeah.
And for some reason, it moved so far into this, well, kind of a demonic space where I'm like watching it and again, that was never a subject on my radar, not because I don't care if other people are suffering, but because I know people that are like, and and all of a sudden I see it on the news, I see it, and what you're describing now, where people can lose their license if they don't affirm this little ideology.
Yeah.
And at this point I'm going, wait, do we need to correct for this? Like, is this a thing? And apparently, absolutely. We have to like not just be aware of it, but like talk about it in a way of like actual correction of some sort.
Yeah.
Yeah. What it's crazy. You're saying that somebody literally, it's like literally brainwashing.
Yeah, it's absolutely. And so one of the things that I do that is unique is that I do psychedelic facilitation with body work, but I use what's called a TENS unit. It's called, have you ever used a stim unit or excuse me, a stim machine where you put the electrodes on your muscles and it zaps you?
Yes.
Okay. So I use one that's like on steroids. It's like a briefcase size. So what happens is men get on the table on psilocybin usually, and then 2 paddles will go onto their hips or their butt, depending on their face up, face down. The other paddles go onto the ground. I put my foot on it. The electricity travels through my feet all the way through my body and into my hands. So as I touch you, I'm putting an electrical charge into your body.
Nice.
So why this is important is that
You shall not pass.
it's pretty gnarly. It can get pretty, it can get, it can get wild in there. And you don't need, I've learned over doing this 100 times that you don't need the same level of intensity to heal trauma as what the trauma was. So you often need to be more gentle. But one of the things that I've noticed is when I work in men's eyes and ears, right? When you end up holding this, the electricity is going from my fingertips through their eyes and into the brain, and from their ears into the brain. And we're able to locate where the pornography is stored actually in the neural pathways in the brain.
What do you mean by that? You feel or they feel?
I tell them to direct the energy. I say, find where it's stored and let me know when you've located it. And they're like, okay, I can feel the spot. And then I'll put my fingers into that space and I'll say, okay, just open your mouth and release the energy. And so they just go, and all of a sudden it fractals out and their bodies will move into full on.
While you're in psychedelics.
Oh yeah. And it'll move into the full on trauma release of all of that porn that they've been holding in their system.
What is it, Green Mile? What is it?
What?
What was it? What movie was it? Green Mile?
Oh, Green Mile. Yeah, exactly. Same idea. Same idea. But the thing that's trippy about it is what happens is it's like clicking Control Alt Delete on the porn. Yeah. You still have the memories of what you watched, but the actual energetic of your nervous system holding all that trauma is no longer there.
The physicality.
The physicality is gone.
Wow, that's so fascinating.
So I found a way to unbrainwash people.
So how did you arrive at all of that? Like these things are very specific, right? Everything you just described, it's like super specific.
Yeah.
Intuitively, like it just kind of came to you that that's the right thing to do, or?
No. There's a couple that I've worked with out in Phoenix who pioneered using this technology in this particular way, and I went through doing it 5 times myself, including mushrooms, MDMA, and then also with ketamine, which is really interesting when you do these massages, or because you basically you have out of body experiences, which is really trippy.
With ketamine.
Yeah, with ketamine, but I don't do ketamine massages, but I've actually found, I call it soma psychedelic bioelectric bodywork. That's what I call it personally. But I have found personally that low dose or medium dose psilocybin and a conscious playlist that we co-create with the client creates the right ingredients for a very therapeutic experience where we're working through the body as parts work therapy. So let's say I'll give you a good example. Like, let's say somebody is doing a massage on me and they hit my arm. Well, when I first had this happen, I was a baseball player, so there's the injury, like the actual scar tissue, but then there's also all of the emotion of wanting dad's love in there. So then you end up having a situation where you realize, oh, I'm grieving the pain and then also dad's love. And I've done therapy for years, but I wasn't able to actually touch into the grief that was really there. And then once I felt it, then I went over to my dad. I was like, hey, Dad, let's go play catch. Wow. So then we went out and played catch, and now we're back having a good time.
That's amazing.
So understanding that our stories and our parts live in our body, and as you go through the body, you come to these little moments where all of a sudden you're back in your 7, and you're like, hey, I need to talk about this. And then I'll unwind it very slowly. They'll feel through it, and then we'll help integrate that.
So. It's interesting. Yeah, the fact that, the whole thing in Vipassana, or really in all Buddhistic traditions, the whole point is that you basically store a lot in your body. Yeah. And, at least in Vipassana, the point is to not really care about what it was. It makes no difference. It's just that you let it express itself. Yeah. But it is so interesting. It's like this it represents the action that give rise to the injury that is also an emotional injury. It's like a fractal. It just like exists on all the levels at the same time. I have the same thing on my left hand. It's the one, left shoulder and the left hand is the one that tends to always have some kind of a I used to fight in from also shoulder, so a lot of the hooks, and it tore for a while, and I couldn't do like pull-ups like years, and when that healed, then I had my clavicle literally travel like go like this, and then that healed, and now I have. I mean now in general I feel pretty amazing in my body, but like sometimes when it appears, it's like this weird. It was like a tension through this. I wonder why is it always the left arm? I got to think about that, like in terms of what you described just now. It would just be interesting to let go of that whole thing. Yeah. One of the things that I found particularly challenging in my journey with sexuality is that the old me, and I'm pretty sure this is probably a very common problem for guys, where the old me was very, well, everything you described, just like kind of conquer, get, and there's a very particular kind of women that is attracted to that. Yep. That will also, right? And it's usually the darker kind, and there's a certain thing that comes with that. And eventually, when I started doing just changing my life in general, and a lot of it wasn't even conscious, it just kind of unfolded that way. I did arrive at this crossroads where it was very difficult to reconcile the fucking with the loving. And I understood, like logically, I understood that this is a thing that needs to happen somehow. You need to combine them into one thing. And one of the things I found particularly challenging is, doing that. Yep. And all the stuff that I tried had to do with, basically trick myself in the moment to like, can I like, now that I'm with a woman that I love, like, can I now express that thing, but then every time it would come on as itself, and now it's a different thing, and now it's a different, and now, so you can never get at it. So the best way that I found to do it, and I'm to some degree I'm fishing for also advice, is, so I actually found a pretty good way to reconcile is by just stepping back in general and just really just like kind of letting things sit. And eventually I felt that when I re-entered the space, there was a natural recombining of the tapestry in a way that now expresses itself as a whole. But there's still these like places where for a long period I would go without ever wanting it, because I know that if I would want it, I would want it through that, and I don't want it through that. So now just like, and then just kind of say, well, what would be your main advice to approach that?
Yeah, so I would say, so this is something I teach. It's also something that I lead men through exercises in order to integrate this piece. So this is what I call the dark primal masculine integration. And so the way I look at this...
So it's a form of shadow work, basically.
It's a form of shadow work. Yeah. And so this is, one of my mentors is Jamie Wheel, and he talks about that we have an amoral animal in us, and then we have the moral human soul and spirit, and we're both. And so the amoral animal in us wants to take, wants to fuck, wants to do all the things, cheat, whatever, doesn't care about whatever, right? Yeah. And then we have these other aspects that want to make love and like want to have a safe, connective, like open, vulnerable experience, right? So how do we integrate these two things that are really polar, like that's polarity.
They seem to be polar.
They seem, but the way through this, in my experience, there's two ways. Okay, so the first one, so I'm holding a men's intensive here in San Diego, actually at the end of March, and we're going to take men through this. So what we do is we form a circle, and then we put two pillows in the middle, and I'll demonstrate first. And I go into the middle of the circle, and on the left is like kill or fight energy, and then on the right is fuck or rape energy, right? And so what you do is you go in and you basically bring sound to it first, just and then you just go for it. And then you go right over to the other pillows, and then you go into that dark primal place. After you go back a few rounds, you then stop and you bring that energy up into the heart space, and you feel into the power of that, and then you ground. Now, that's where I'm at after doing that for many, many years, 5 years. For most men, there's grief in that experience, right? So as they move through those dark primal masculine integration, there's tears, there's fear, they get frozen, they get scared. And so we all come in and we put our hands on the men to be there and to witness him and whatever his experience is of not being able to do it or being able to do it. And ultimately that impacts the field. And then when we share, hey, what was that like to witness others and to be able to be held by a group of men to integrate these darker things. So that's the first piece to it. The second piece is when you do mindful masturbation and you are sitting, let's say, on a meditation cushion and you have a straight spine, especially if you're in the mirror, because that's really helpful. If you're actually masturbating and you breathe the energy up, right? That actually allows for you to learn how to burn off heat, right? And so when you learn how to burn off heat, then you can actually rev the engine is what I call it. So you can actually get to a place where you can masturbate very vigorously if you're doing breath work at the same time. And as you do that, you can actually get to a place where you can ride a wave of like 20 minutes of full clearing and cleansing of your body and all the energy that doesn't feel good. And then once you've actually tapped that and you've achieved that, then you can bring that same level of energetic, like dark masculine integration into the bedroom where you're not losing yourself, but you're actually still in your heart and you're still able to have eye contact and make sure that you're in consent with your partner.
So you're not it, but you can bring it.
Exactly. You're in your soul, but you can bring that fucking primal energy, and it's beautiful.
So you're in control of it. It's not in control of you, basically.
Exactly.
Interesting. So basically, you express it enough that you get comfortable and you see what it is, versus it's usually expressing itself, and to you it's just like a car wreck, so you don't even know what's going on. Yeah. Here, you're doing it consciously, so you see it, you know what that energy is, you recognize it, so you can now pull on it because you see what it is. Interesting. Perfect. Yeah, I'll definitely try that. Thank you.
Do it.
What now I want to ask you what I wanted to ask you, which is, for people watching at home, a lot of times things they have to do with specifics and practice and, well, tactics in a sense, right? It's a little difficult sometimes to gauge and see that space, especially if it's something that somebody never considered.
Yep.
So from the most macro, from the strategic space, what would be, you're meeting someone on the flight, let's say they're not annoying, let's say you somehow engage with them and you're like, okay, I'll talk to this person, and they got really interested in what you do. You feel you want to empower them, you feel you want to give them the kind of the works, you can't because you're going to get off the flight in 30 minutes. What do you say to them? How do they start by just overview of how do they even approach their own entering the healing space? How, like, what are the first, like, macro scale thing you would say to somebody, what to notice, what to pay attention? I know it's a little bit of a...
It's a big one, yeah. I would say the first step, if a man is in secrecy, silence, and shame with his phone underneath the covers, is really a bold move, which is go find a place in nature where you can connect to yourself without a digital device. That's the first step. If you can't be safe and comfortable and in your own experience in a natural environment where we're in connection with nature and God, then we're too domesticated. And when we're too domesticated, it's very difficult for us to be in that integrated primal space. So it's a strange thing to recommend, but I think that's the first step. Then when men can reconnect their sexuality back into nature, I call it ecoeroticism. We begin to see that we don't actually need to be thinking our way to orgasm through the mind. We can actually feel our way to orgasm through connection with the all.
Yeah, it's not that weird. You know who Michael Levine is? Yeah, so everything he's talking about, the boundary, right? And how cancer might just be a cell that is not aware that it's part of a larger whole. It's kind of the same thing. Because then you do things in your own accord and only on your own accord. And you don't really, it's not even that you're evil, you just don't understand that everything you do has some implication for the collective. So when you go to nature, it's easier to feel that. And if you can go without the phone, which is the thing that locks you into your own personal bubble, I think it makes perfect sense. So really what you're saying, they should just do a heavy hit of psychedelics.
Yeah, exactly. Go big, go out in nature, get naked and hang out.
Yeah, and don't get arrested.
Exactly. Don't do it in nature or in a neighborhood, right? Go far out.
It's unfortunate because the Eaton fire that just happened, which of course is just terrible. That was it's almost like a symbolic place. Aside from the fact that we used to hike there all the time because it's very close. That's where I took Kelsey for her first like proper like mushroom trip. We were just kind of walking around, so it's like, oh man, it was a glorious day. We laughed a lot. In terms of how you view your work, connecting to the larger body of work of therapy as a whole, do you feel, or maybe you don't even have these interactions, or if you do you feel that there is a much greater opening by other, I guess, more mainstream, it doesn't even matter the licensing right now, I'm just talking about like more mainstream people who kind of operate within the system. Do you see that there's more of an opening to like kind of incorporate some of these like, you know, more what some would consider slightly more esoteric elements, or do you think that we still have a very long way to go before it's gonna?
I think those that are on the journey that we're talking, it's been exponential over the last 10 years. And I think the people that are still in conformity, I think they're really resisting and they're going kind of downwards. And so I kind of see it sort of
Interesting.
going in that direction.
Did you have the chance to talk to maybe any like mainstream therapists that kind of doing, you know?
A lot of therapists come to me. I've worked with 5 different therapists that have been addicted to porn.
Wow.
They find me on the internet and they go, I need help. And so it's interesting because, you know, again, not as a licensed therapist, but just trained as a therapist. A lot of men, they basically hide that. And you can, as a therapist, you can only take another man as far as you've been.
Oh yeah.
So it's kind of like there's a lot of stopgaps here, right?
So do you feel like that they would definitely, like, obviously they will never be able to talk about it, not anytime soon, but do you feel like they would incorporate elements like that into their own practices?
They do.
Yeah.
They absolutely do. Like there's a couple of them that are now like a year out of watching porn, and it's massively helped them in the way in which they work with the men that they work with too.
That's amazing. Yeah. That is so encouraging. I do know of a few that, like, you know, obviously some of it has to be behind closed doors, and because psychedelics still are kind of illegal. But yeah, it's so encouraging to see how this whole thing grows. And it seems honestly that, for all intents and purposes, at least in California, I don't know of anybody going after anyone with mushrooms, at least. Like it's.
I had one friend that got busted here locally in Ocean Beach for doing mushroom ceremonies.
Really?
Yep.
That's the first thing I've ever heard of.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
But luckily they're
and also another grow operation as well. So 2 people.
Grow is a little different.
It's a little different.
I get
grow.
it. Yeah. But like with therapy, I mean, like
he was a shaman therapist kind of guy, and they just came right into his house, and he went to jail.
So weird. I wonder who would tip him off, like.
I know.
I don't
know. It's weird.
Somebody who was probably disgruntled or something. That is very weird. Yeah. Wow. So tell me a little bit, because this is a little unorthodox, even I would say for incorporating of psychedelics with healing practices. I'm very experienced with DMT. One thing that at least to me was always obvious that, and you sound that you would disagree with that, and that's why I would love to hear what you have to say. The DMT in particular, at least NN-DMT, seems to be unique in that sense that it's almost like it can do basically anything, but because of that, it's also like very kind of like this like an overarching blanket of just like all of it. And because of that, it always seemed to me it doesn't necessarily lend itself that easily for healing, because that's why you would go to something more like ayahuasca or 5-MeO, because they're more like they do the thing for you, right? With NN, as one of the people recently that I saw doing it, and they said this is the cold truth. You know what I mean? So tell me a little bit more about how you are utilizing NN, because you told me something about mirror work with it and things like this. I'd love to hear more about that.
So I'll just share my story. So I'll give you some context. So my men's group, we do psychedelic retreats every year, and we went out to Joshua Tree. And the first night, I just took a little handshake hit, and that was my first experience with DMT after working with other psychedelics for 6 or so years. And it was remarkably different, than anything I'd experienced. So the next day was our big day. We did a mushroom journey. I took 5 grams of Pedis albinos, and they were great. It was a really good journey. On the way out of it, we got back to camp, and I would say 75% through the trip, but still high. And anyways, I had brought these little mirrors that I wanted us to do a little thing. I don't know why. I bought them on Amazon. I was like, hey, let's sit around and let's look in the mirror and then let's talk about it. And everybody was like, get the fuck out of here. Like, nah, whatever. And I was like, all right, whatever. And then I said to one of my friends, I said, what if we smoked DMT and then looked in the fucking mirror? And it literally was like my head like exploded. I was terrified and simultaneously like overjoyed, like running around like a crazy man, right? Mind you, I'd been in therapy for many years and I was deep into shadow work and like trying to understand what can't I see that's
Might destabilize you.
exactly. And so in this experience, I was like, all right, guys, after dinner, would you guys be willing to hold space for me? And they're like, sure. My buddy had his bus there, so he had a full-length mirror. So we took the whole full-length mirror out of his bus and we went out into the desert, and it was stormy. It was like kind of bizarre, and like the wind was blowing, and I was like, oh my God, this is kind of nuts, guys. And we had a bong with like a little lavender with the DMT, and I was like, all right, you guys ready to hold space? And they're like, sure. So I had a lantern in my lap, and I had 4 friends. They were standing, holding the mirror and kind of like sitting next to me. So I said a prayer, I was like, I don't know what the fuck's gonna happen, like I've never heard of anybody doing this. So,
No, it's a known thing.
Is it?
Work, yeah.
Oh, is it? Okay.
That's why I'm surprised that you just kind of came up with it.
No, I had no fucking clue.
Yeah.
None at all. And so I hit it, I exhaled, hit it, looked into the mirror, and it was like this: man, woman, child, brown, black, yellow, red, blue, old, young, like just fractaling through different faces. And then languages and songs that I knew them, but I didn't know them, playing at like warp speed, spiraling as a funnel, like out of my ears. And as those left and the faces dissolved, then it went into that, and I was like, whoa. And then as I looked again, it was just like fractaled sacred geometry, like looking at an Alex Gray painting, right?
Wow.
And I was like, and the combination of mushrooms with the DMT
somehow. Okay. Yeah. No, they really like each other.
Oh
sure.
my
Yeah,
God.
Yeah.
And I looked at my fucking skin and my body, and I was like, my shirt was off, and I was like, I was basically seeing myself as light and only light, or at a soul level is what my mind was telling me, or what I was experiencing. And then I was too afraid to look up yet, so I like looked left. There was a huge cactus next to me just glowing as an orb, and I was like, oh my God. And then I looked up at each of my friends, and each of them was completely, it was like looking at a ghost, basically.
Wow.
They were just fractal energy with different geometries, and their faces were washed out. Like it was not like I was seeing a white guy or any color man. It was just fucking souls, like
Casper the Ghost.
Exactly, Casper the Ghost, but the most peaceful, quiet experience. Like it was like, oh, this is sobriety for the first time in my life.
Wow.
Right.
Wow.
So full ego death. And then I look back in the mirror and I start to smile and then start to laugh. And then I hear one message, and the message is, this is what you do, bring people back here. And I was like, okay.
That's amazing.
That's all it was.
Yeah, it's a known thing. It's amazing that they just told, or you kind of intuited it, and then it was like, yeah, that's what you do. That's so interesting, because you can, like you say, like you can dissolve yourself. You can do so many different things with it. Man, I miss that. I can't have that anymore.
I know.
Yeah, they put the different function on me now. That's so, yeah, this is why now I never liked trip reports, because it was always very boring to me, and people always think they're gonna blow your mind. They never do.
I know.
And then but now I cherish them, because now I can't have that.
Yeah.
So I'm like, dude, that sounds amazing. It sounds so amazing.
I've yet to have anybody quite replicate anything like what I had when I've facilitated, because I facilitated close to 100 times, both with individuals and then couples as well. But I have had situations where people have seen themselves as old and young, and is it past life? Is it not a past life? What are we interfacing with here, right?
It can swap people's faces. It can basically do anything. If I've learned anything, they can literally do anything.
Yeah.
It's DMT basically allows for the ultimate function. And what exactly causes what, I'm not really sure, but there's definitely some kind of a influence that we can exert on it or ask it to do. But it's a very almost like mechanical, not mechanical in the sense of soulless, just mechanical in terms of like, oh, it's just press this button, this happens. We just don't always know what these buttons are.
Yeah.
And that's why it's such a powerful tool. So how do you do it in your practice? You basically just have people stand in front of the mirror and smoke, or?
No, so 2 yoga cushions, I'm to the right, they're in front of the mirror, and I get them as close as possible. So your face is about this close. Okay. And then you put a headlamp on and do it in the dark room. So your only sort of sense of what you're seeing is just the light in your face. And then I use, I have a volcano, and then I also have an eclipse vape. Both of those work. I don't know how to use the eclipse well enough yet. It can get a little too hot, right? Have you used it? Okay. So, but the volcano works really great. And then I have a big, an eagle that came to me near Utah, near Golden Arches. So I have a big eagle that I have a piece of leather on. So I use that for clearings. And I'll just do basically a Palo Santo, clearing, get them sit down. And then I have a breathing restrictor. So they put it in their mouth and then they open up their lungs, because when people take in DMT, if their lungs aren't warm, then they can't actually hold it in, and then they'll cough or it'll come out too fast. And then from there, I take them through a parts work exercise. So I have them close their eyes and scan their body. And then I ask, do you have any parts of you that are in any form of resistance or fear to having this journey? And so then when they find a spot, they're like, yeah, it's in the gut or the heart or throat or whatever. Then I say, okay, tune into that. What does it feel like? What's the somatic sensation? What does it want to know? What does it want to tell you? And then it'll say something. And then it'll be, a good example would be like, I'm being drawn back to 2 years ago when I had a bad psychedelic facilitation, and I'm afraid that something like what I had could happen again. That's a perfect example. So then I'll work with that part of the person to get permission to make sure that it feels safe in order to do the journey. And so from a parts work perspective, if you get permission from the whole person's system and all of their parts, then their journey is a lot smoother therapeutically, and they don't come in with a lot of anxiety or their heart beating too quickly.
Yeah.
So then once that's done, then I put headphones on them, and I use Larimar Sound Alchemy. Do you know Larimar? I'll send you the music. It's beautiful for ketamine journeys, actually, is what I like it most for. But it's just ambient, beautiful. He uses a dig, and it's very shamanic. And then when they're ready, I have them just open their eyes and just look at me, and then I'll start the vaporizer and hand them the bag. Then they exhale and take it in. And then I'll just hold space for them as I take the bag back, and then I just hold space for them to have their experience. Now, people have very, very different experiences. When I first started holding space, I wasn't holding a very strong container. And so I noticed that as I've evolved and I've gotten to a place where my nervous system is what they're regulating with, I'm having way less situations where people have big meltdowns. But in the beginning, people would see themselves and, be terrified, right? They would just burst into tears. Sometimes like full traumas they would appear, and they would roll back and just start rolling into like full blown like trauma releases, and I would just be doing clearings or whatever.
Define strong container. What is it that you're doing different now? Like you define it stronger for them? You make your presence felt more? What is it?
It's psychological safety. I didn't know how to get permission from people's parts in order for them to actually feel safe. And then in addition to that, I didn't know how to regulate my own nervous system to be calm.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Through being the facilitator. And so therefore, if I was beating hard and I was like kind of scared, then they would, of course, that would infuse into their own journey. So I have to be grounded and rooted, and I have to do my own clearings and my own meditation in order to feel like, okay, I'm going to be able to hold good space for this individual no matter what comes up.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a huge one.
Because some people will see themselves in the mirror and they'll scream at the top of their lungs, like full bloody murder. Like that's how crazy it can be. Other people get up, try to run, try to move. Other people move into mudras and, kind of like yogic practices. Some people just are just frozen. Some people fall into the glass and drool all over themselves, right? It kind of just depends upon the individual. And so what I'm responsible for is making sure that they don't fall forward or backwards and hurt themselves, and to just hold energetic space. So usually hand on the heart on both sides if need be, but I choose not to touch if I don't have to, right? Depends on the individual and their capacity to hold the gravity of whatever they're seeing or experiencing. But I usually at the end, I put pillows behind them and I'll lay them back down and let them integrate that way, and I'll do more clearings as they're
So basically, you worked on trusting that it is doing the right thing for them, and you should have the least like your own personal emotional response to it. You're just holding a neutral space, basically.
And then I don't do any forced processing after. If they want to talk, great. But I don't, hey, what was your experience like? What's your takeaway?
Oh, yeah.
Just like letting them have space, and then when they're ready, they can talk, and then they can share as much or as little as they want.
I've only recently became more, I guess, oriented towards like helping facilitate a little bit. Not in terms of healing. It was more like, well, people wanted to see the laser, and now, you know, I've done it so many times that I just thought, oh, that no problem, I can just. And then I realized very quickly that facilitating and doing it, two completely different worlds. And then I had to put an effort on actually trying to at least bring myself to like a minimal level of being able to like being a good facilitator. And I finally reached a stage where people like really tell me like they feel comfortable and all that stuff. And that is a giant component I found, which is feeling comfortable with whatever is happening and just allowing it to happen. And really holding kind of like a strong center to always make them feel that if something happens, you're north. Yeah. Like you can always like rely on me to basically show you the thing. It's such a, it made me like, I knew that it's not a whatever thing, but it made me really appreciate what a seasoned shaman really is, like what it actually means to be on a certain level of that. Yep. Just a small anecdote, but in my ayahuasca ceremony, I had this really, really great shaman. I think Michael was his name. And he was, I remember I was going through one of my, I decided in the middle I'm going to stand up and just put my hands up and see if I can stand straight. And then all of a sudden it felt really good to just go into some kind of a semi-shock. I just wanted to really move my body. So I just went into crazy, you know. Yeah. And I remember watching him scanning the tent. And he just kind of like scanned the room, and then he stopped on me and just looked me in the eyes for like maybe 5 seconds as I was like going nuts. And he's just like, yeah, you were right. And then just kind of kept going. He's like he saw I'm just having a blast. He's like, you're good. Like I was like, whoa. That's another level of connected. Like he knows.
That's great.
Yeah, it's amazing. So I'm always, whenever people ask me, he's like, what should I look for in a facilitator? I always point to that, which is like feel how well they understand. How well you feel understood in their presence even before anything begins. Yeah. So like if you have to clarify too many things, it doesn't make them a bad shaman. They're just not your shaman. Yeah. They have to immediately understand where you're coming from and like where you stand and all of that stuff. Yep. And I'm really getting it from you as well, which is like you are very, very grounded. You actually did the work. You understand the process that you needed to go through to heal through what you needed to heal through, which is an important component, I think, because if somebody came already built in, like somebody came and didn't have to go through the moves that now you're putting other people through, that's usually not going to be a good teacher or facilitator, because the teacher does not understand the actual struggle that people are going through when they're going through these stages.
Yeah, and if you're in a shamanic position or a facilitator position or therapist position, my responsibility is not to make my client hold my shit in any way, shape, or form. So if I haven't processed it or grieved it or moved through it, then that's not a safe container for them to be able to lean in and trust and let anything come through. So if I do share something personally about my own life, I share it with brevity and with only if it relates to this exact moment, and I let it go, and I bring no emotionality into how I share it, just to give a data point, like what you just did with the ayahuasca experience. Like you could have went deep into that and we could have got spun out into whatever the fuck, right? But you didn't, right? Same with me. If I'm gonna share something, I'm gonna share it meaningfully in the moment, and then I'm gonna let the client come back and have their experience.
Yeah. I think it's what people sometimes miss with information sharing in general, is that they forget what their point was. Yeah. The point is, I understood what it's like to be a great connected shaman. Yeah. If I delivered that point, that's the end of the story. Sometimes people get into these, but again, all of these like informational patterns are super important to hold, because you also learn probably constantly through every single session with the new clients all the time. So allowing that to also be part of the learning, and I feel like that's a flexibility that is super important. Yeah, it's one of these things that I do meet that sometimes when people like are convinced almost like omnipotence of the, you're like, oh, I've arrived. It's like, well, then you're dangerous. I don't.
There's infinite ego deaths.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. In the same ayahuasca ceremony, I was also learned from her that they also, I guess whatever you want to call them, the guides, they also receive information from us. They constantly learn with each interaction. So like it kind of showed me like the birth of responsibility.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Wow, man.
I want to share one of my biggest lessons of facilitating, just please. Because I think it's an important thing for you. So one of the most important things that I've learned through facilitation, especially when I facilitate with women, is that for whatever reason, I attract women that have had complex PTSD, sexual trauma, rape trauma. It's just, for whatever reason, they're attuned. Probably because it's a part of my lineage, and because I had to go through my own healing around that stuff, it's just like I create a space where women want to heal in the presence of the masculine and not just do it with other women. So what I've noticed is that, especially with DMT, if a woman has had sexual trauma, she hits it and she lays down in her experience. I've noticed that first off, I've never ever dated or had any sexual experiences or sexual connection with a client. That's like a hard boundary, and it's something that in the past when I was single, I would state that up front, right? So that
I have not had sex.
Well, no, exactly. But more so just like my boundary as a facilitator is that you and I will never have a sexual experience.
Yeah, it is important to put it out front because it for sure arises energetically all of a sudden.
Well,
literally the most vulnerable. It's like,
oh my God, point being, there are so many shamans that take advantage of women in psychedelic ceremonies. I've had now 12 women that have come to me and have been sexually abused in shamanic containers.
So crazy.
From all around the world. Ayahuasca, 5-MeO, ketamine, LSD, mushrooms. It's fucking nuts. It's crazy how many of them find me somehow. It's not like I advertise this shit. I don't I work with women that have had, it's like whatever, but they find me. So what I've noticed is that if a woman is either aware or not aware, but especially if there's some level of like, they've talked to me, hey, I think maybe something happened, I'm not quite sure, whatever. What happens is if I lie them down, I had this experience where I was being invited energetically by the person's field into recreating that with them. Meaning
now to be safe,
Exactly. And so what I noticed is that trauma holds an imprint and the field holds an imprint that invites that. Because they're testing, are you safe, are you not safe? And then of course that's how it invites in other men that continue that for themselves, right?
They confuse that with an invitation.
Exactly. So that's how a lot of shamans I don't know, justify it.
Well, it is true that sometimes they just truly not aware enough.
They're not aware enough to go, oh, that wasn't an invitation at all, and or, whatever. And so in that moment I was like, whoa, and I had to step outside of the field and then do a clearing and then just hold the space to like understand what the fuck's happening. Because I'm sober, she's not. Then when she sits up, she's like, oh my God, I just saw, I was abused in a ceremony. This man, DMT, many years, he was doing it. I woke up one time, he had his hand in my shirt. I didn't know that it was true or not. I told myself it didn't happen, but it did happen. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And so then we had to process that and clear that, right? Point being is, after all that, it was like this sort of awareness of her being like, oh my God, I've never been safe ever in the presence of a man until this moment. And that, the sort of the light bulb goes off. And
just the fact that even if the invitation happens to this pattern, it won't happen because you will make sure that it doesn't.
Exactly.
Wow.
And I interrupted that for her. And so that was a very beautiful moment where I was like, okay, DMT has incredible healing potential if facilitated in a therapeutic context where there's safety, security, boundaries, and confidentiality, and so on and so forth, right? And the person facilitating has to have done their fucking sexual shadow work, because most men will take that as an invitation and then they'll do something that's inappropriate.
Yeah, or not have enough of a control of themselves over that. Yeah. No, it was always very clear to me. There was this. I have a friend. She's an extremely beautiful woman, and I wasn't like facilitating. We were just like sharing DMT, and then the kind of thing started happening like towards the thing, and immediately it was clear to me that's like, I don't know, it's like, it's just wrong. Like, it's not. She actually was wearing a skirt, and I was like, I made it as a suggestion. It's like if you don't feel comfortable in this, maybe you should put pants on. You know, like because it was so. It's a very shifty line.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's a very shifty line, especially when the temptation is too great, and also like, oh, we're fucked up on drugs, you know, whatever. It's very. But I guess if you're a shaman, it's less excusable because then don't be a shaman. It's just don't play that role then.
Yep.
Yeah.
I totally agree, but I would also say that the reason why people become shamans is because they're predators before they're shamans.
They're what?
They're predators before they're shamans.
I don't know. So again, this is where maybe we have a slightly different language. I don't know. Like you're right. For sure, in some cases, I think it's sometimes just a weakness. I wouldn't necessarily frame it as a predator, but
so predator isn't a judgment based upon like all men. I've worked with men that are rapists, so like I have a lot of sensitivity around this because most men that have actually raped people, they have had sexual abuse themselves, right? And so this is a lineage burden that they're carrying, and therefore, so I have a lot of sensitivity. And there are men that are that way that want help, and there are men that are choosing not to get help, right?
Yeah,
so when I say predator, I'm talking about people that know that they've had abuse.
they choose not to help.
They're choosing not to.
Oh, that's going around for sure. Yeah, there's no question about that.
Yeah.
I guess I'm in the habit of I'm trying to the extent that I can extend as much generosity as possible to help, because some of these people would also have to eventually somehow heal. And forget the name of this book. There's a wonderful book about creating the right frames around people.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know what I'm talking about, right? And then they can walk into that frame if they choose to. And then I'm trying to do that as much as possible. But I agree with you. The other thing definitely exists. It's actually how I define evil. Evil is when you know and you choose to do something else. If you don't know, it is what it is, right?
Yeah. There's people. So this is the way I look at it. So this is going back to sexuality. So I teach what I call a mythopoetic map. And the map is that the way that a man treats his penis is the way that he treats everyone and everything in the world. That's not a truth, but it's a map, right? So what I'm saying is if I'm self-objectifying and I'm using myself to feel better, I can't even see because it's in my shadow that I'm using a woman or nature or
just
my
to
business.
please it versus
Exactly.
like connecting through it.
Exactly. So then that's why I have grace for people who are stuck on porn and they can't see that they're being, malevolent out in the world.
Yeah.
And then as they write their relationship to their own bodies, then they stop using other people in the way that they're using themselves. Amazing. So, and then men that, we could go deep into the circumcision conversation, but like the very first thing that happens is you come out and you get snipped. Somebody's taking something from you. So we feel destructively entitled and we have that trauma. So then do we not psychologically grow up to then take from the world in the same way that something was taken before we had any agency? Right?
You got to give it some thought. It's like it sounds tailor suited.
It's a big conversation.
No, it is a good one. Yeah. Listen, Tyson, this is amazing. I would also actually love to do this again sometime. First of all, where can people find you, both your practice and also all your the main public-facing stuff that you have?
Yeah, so I don't have my website fully published yet, so it's not there. But if you just go to Instagram and Facebook, Tyson Adams. Just
Tyson Adams, one word?
Tyson Adams, one word, 2 underscores after that.
Okay. Well, that's
Instagram.
important.
Yeah.
Okay, amazing.
Yeah.
Brother, you're an absolute delight. It's very exciting to be able to be a part of bringing your work to light, because I think that's very important. One of the things that I always say now is that humanity simply ran out of options, ran out of time, and we simply have to put things in order. And people like you are super important for this process because you're actually taking people literally hand in hand and you're showing them the ropes versus giving them just the theory, writing a book and then doing a thing, but you're actually putting in the work. And I deeply appreciate that. It's someone who has to do a tiny version of what you do and not even related to healing. It's just like putting people through these experiences. It's a tremendous amount of work. Sometimes I think most people don't realize how much work goes into be able to be a vehicle to facilitate these kind of things. So not only I have tremendous respect for what you do, but like I'm in awe of people that do this on a regular basis as their main thing. So thank you so much for what you're doing and also for the world. So I appreciate you, brother. Thank you.
Yeah.